I think that we're just scared of the word processed. I know it sounds nonsensical, but everything we eat to some degree is processed. And yes, there are various levels to processing, but we just need to remember that because people will say, I don't eat processed foods, and I can guarantee you do. There are different levels, but I think we need to stop saying the narrative, I don't eat anything processed. Yes, you do. But I will say, that people, I think with the headlines that are constantly out now, from I'm seeing them all the time, CNN, Washington Post, about the implications of processed foods. Now they're saying ultra processed. Now they're labeling that. But even ultra processed, I think people don't realize sometimes that ultra processed still are powders. There's still, if you are, let's say, vegan or vegetarian and you want to use like the Beyond Meat, those
Yep.
imitation patties, or, those are ultra processed. That doesn't mean they're unhealthy foods.
Welcome to the Feminist Wellbeing Podcast, my sisters. I'm your host, Stephanie Dozier, non-diet nutritionist, certified non-diet coach, and cognitive behavioral expert. And I've earned my PhD in diet culture by the age of 40. I finally graduated from a 25-year dieting career. And today I am here to guide you on how you can feel damn good by reshaping your mind instead of your body. In this podcast, we go beyond the food and we fight diet culture and patriarchy by living powerfully. And today I have a guest, and we're going to have a very important conversation about the elitism aspect of health and wellness in 2024. In this conversation with me is Shana Minei Spence, and today she is releasing her debut book titled Live Nourished, Make Peace with Food, Banish Body Shame, and Reclaim Joy. And she has a very unique perspective on how health and wellness trend is leading us in today's environment. So without any further wait, I'm going to ask my team to roll in the interview with Shana. Enjoy, and I would love to hear from you on social media on your thoughts after listening to our conversation. Welcome to the podcast, Shana.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited to be helping you, supporting you in the launch of your book, Live, Nourish, Make Peace with Food, Banishing Body Shame and Reclaiming Joy, which is launching today.
Yes. I know. Very exciting. Very exciting.
It's going to be a day that Shana remembers for the rest of her life, the launch of her book. And what I particularly enjoy about your book, and this is where I want to have a deeper conversation, it's the intersectionality perspective, social justice, social economic factor, cultural food, always with a good sense of humor is what you're known for on the internet. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to start with this quote from your book. Wellness is like that exclusive club in New York or Miami where there's a huge line to get in, but once inside, you realize that there's really nothing special, just overpriced drinks and food. And unfortunately, wellness is not accessible to everyone, just like those clubs. Mm-hmm. Tell me more about this. I picked the right one.
Yeah. Because when you think about it, I think wellness sort of has an elitist connotation or attachment to it now, and it shouldn't. In my opinion, wellness is what we can do to support our individual health, but the thing is that it is made out to be now the more money we spend, the better we think our health status will be. And I think that's the problem, because when we think of wellness, we think of often these expensive retreats or expensive, yoga classes or things like that. And I'm not saying that those things are wrong. I'm just saying that many people can't afford that, but that doesn't mean that they're any less of an individual. And I think that sometimes we kind of get it distorted, where we think that the more money I spend, the better I will be, or the more a product is, the more expensive a product is, the better that product is. And I think that's also a huge problem. When you look at so many of these wellness products, should anyone pay like $70 for a protein powder? So that's sort of why I wrote that in actuality, because when you think about it, it is exclusive.
Well, and it's a question why anybody should, and also, can anybody can?
Exactly. There are people, of course, who can. And I just want to make it clear, if people enjoy those things, I'm not saying not to do that. I also do yoga, so I'm not saying not to do that. I'm just saying that sometimes we attach an elitist mindset to these things, and we shouldn't. It should be whatever you can do in your individual lifestyle, accessibility wise, financial wise, whatever you can do to support your health. That's wellness. It doesn't have to be spending $75 on a class or, a protein powder.
So help the listener understand the difference between wellness and health. Your book does it well, but I want to tease in people to go get the book. So there's a difference between the two.
Yes. So what I'm trying to get into people's heads is that wellness is what we all can do. And wellness, in fact, is something that we all do in our own way. It's something that supports health. So we all have an individual health status, right? We all know our bodies and know what we can do to support our bodies. And that support can be in the form of wellness. It can even be going for a run after work, a walk after work, meditation, writing in a journal if you're stressed out. Those things are considered wellness in order to support our health, right? Because when we think of health, we think of our physicality, our mental state as well. So wellness is what we can do to support our health. The issue that I have is that mainstream wellness is becoming inaccessible.
Yeah, and also by putting on a platform certain way of taking care of your wellness, we also, in my view, and I don't know if you agree, we create a moral status by how much you spend and how much resources you assign or give to your effort towards wellness.
Exactly. And that's also a problem because, we tend to judge someone on their health status or what we think their health status is by looking at them. And that's a big problem. Yes.
Yeah. And or by how much of their resources, whatever their amount of resources they have, the attribute to make up, because that was me. Like when I decided to quit diet culture and stop dieting, I gained weight and I had about a span of about 2 to 3 years where I overdid wellness to offset the lack of my body to be thin.
Yes, and that's what many people do. It's quite interesting because a lot of times we associate health with thinness, with what a body looks like. And we have to realize that those two things are not synonymous. They're not the same thing at all. But at the same time, we shouldn't judge someone if they are quote unquote unhealthy or have an illness or condition. So there's multiple layers here, but I do think that we tend to equate thinness with health when we really should not. We really should not.
And the capacity, your financial capacity or time capacity to assign your resources to getting better, quote unquote, and it's your fault if you can't.
Exactly.
In that wave of wellness, elitism, our culture of food gets pulled into that, right? So I'm going to read another quote from your book. Cultural food are an important tie to our heritage and background. And we can celebrate this and also eat in a way that nourish you. Healthy eating and eating cultural food does not have to cancel each other out. And you
Yes.
say, and it's in fact a form of racism.
Yes, I think that unfortunately, so many times, a lot of, quote unquote, ethnic foods are deemed unhealthy. When we look at, I mean, actually, quite recently, there was, I think, a world list of best foods put out, and you see the ones that are always at the top. I don't even have to say which ones are always at the top. We all know. So we all
Kale.
know that. And it's just very interesting because cultural foods in certain cultures are always deemed at the bottom or always deemed unhealthy. And I think we have to stop that narrative, that mentality of thinking that. And I know that sometimes people think that it doesn't matter or think of it as a nonchalant way, but we have to realize how that makes someone feel. If your food is, constantly, if you're being told your cultural foods are constantly unhealthy or that you should cut down on something, think that there's something wrong with your culture. You internalize that. And we know that because there are studies done where that has been proven. And I'm not saying if you need to swap out an ingredient or not eat something because, again, of your individual body, that is fine. But the issue I have is labeling a whole culture as unhealthy or the food as unhealthy.
Yeah, and I'll give you the example of this. So I'm French, of a
Mm-hmm.
European origin. So I've been raised on bread and I've been raised on cheeses. And then when I came to the world of health and went back to school to do my nutrition degree, then all my cultural food were quote unquote bad. They had gluten, they had dairy, and I had to be a good nutritionist or to be healthy, I had to stop consuming the food that I had spent my most of my life eating and had a lot of very positive memory around.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. And that's the thing, I think that for many people, they internalize that feeling and think, oh my goodness, what are we doing? We're the problem. And you shouldn't think that. You shouldn't. If you, again, I keep repeating it because I just want to make it clear. If you need to do it for individual reasons, that is fine. But I think as a whole, we um tend to group people as a whole, and that's the problem, really. I mean, same thing with my cultural foods. Like, a lot of southern foods, Caribbean foods are deemed unhealthy, and I don't eat that every day. I will just say that I don't eat those foods every day, but I wouldn't never say that they're unhealthy because it's a celebration of your heritage and your culture. It's there for a reason.
And
So
it's a form of in the form of oppression, if we want to say it this way, to say like this culture's eating habit or food is not as good as the Western Eurocentric type of food. We are
exactly.
repeating the past here, but just we're doing it with food instead of skin color or origin.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, we can even look at the whole debate on MSG still.
Oh yeah.
People are still so scared of it. And when you read the history about it and where that fear came from, so MSG, which is used in many Chinese dishes, it's
Yeah.
still, used, of course, overseas. And for a while, it was looked down upon and frowned upon because one man went to a Chinese restaurant way back when, and he got sick. And so he blamed the MSG, he blamed how they were cooking the food, and it actually started a big xenophobic kind of campaign around Chinese food and around Chinese people, really, because you're thinking, oh my gosh, what are you guys doing? What are you cooking with? And so and it started where you see, even to this day, a lot of Chinese restaurants will advertise, no, we don't use MSG. But in actuality, research has shown MSG is not harmful, and we know that, and it's actually used in Europe, it's used overseas internationally. It is safe, it's deemed safe, but people will still say, oh no, it's so bad, I can't believe they're putting that in their food. But MSG also occurs naturally in tomatoes and Parmesan cheese. It's also very natural. So I think that sometimes, again, that kind of mindset we have to really think about.
Well, so a common probably friend of ours, a Latina nutritionist, is always talking about like white rice in Latina culture or even in Asian culture and how Western approach, which even quote unquote science or supposed science deemed white rice to be unhealthy. Meanwhile, that is the main staple food for a majority of the world.
Yes, exactly. I have one dietitian friend, and she's still fighting the battle, still fighting the
Yeah.
battle. Maybe we're talking about the same person.
Yeah.
Yes, it's really mind-blowing because whenever she posts about it, you will still see the comments underneath, and it's really mind-blowing. I'm like, wow, people really can't, they're just holding on to that narrative that it's unhealthy.
Well,
Um,
it's just like when I post a picture of my body. I get the same, like she
yeah.
gets it for white rice. I get it for being fat and being a quote health expert. People cannot get off of that bandwagon.
Yes, it's just like they can't comprehend that maybe what they were taught was incorrect. And that's the
Yes.
thing, you know?
Let's move into the same topic, but talk about healthcare access and how that impacts. I'm going to quote again from your book. 14.5% of American Indian and Alaska Native have the highest rate of diagnosed diabetes among any race or ethnicity. And in conjunction with this statistic, this population also has the highest amount of inequity in healthcare and health status compared to other US population. Meanwhile, we assess their health status to they don't care about health and their diet is a problem. But we never talk about access to healthcare.
Exactly. Yes. It's very, as far as American Indian, Native American, it's really, the history, of course, most of us know the history of, that population in this country. And it's unfortunate because they're still suffering, and they don't have access to the same things. They don't have access to a lot of stores. They don't have access to a lot of food, to a lot of even healthcare. And so, but then we turn around and say, well, they're doing that to themselves. It's like, are they? Are they? It's really, they're being still discriminated against, as many populations are. But when we look at who has the highest level of diseases or illnesses, we need to start realizing there's a correlation.
Yeah, you quote further in your book, they have a life expectancy of 4.4 years less than any other race in the United States. And I want to say I'm Canadian, and it's the same problem
Yes.
in Canada. They don't even have access to some population to clean water.
Yes.
Let's
Same
not
here.
even talk about fresh vegetables, you know?
Yes, exactly. I think this state, if I'm not mistaken, Flint, Michigan, still has problems with getting clean water. So it's really, really sad. And I'm sure, I don't know the statistics of Flint, Michigan right now, but I'm pretty sure their health status isn't great. And we need to start making that correlation, not just saying, well, they don't care, the people don't care. They don't have access. It's
Well,
a problem.
they don't have access to healthcare. They don't have access to food. So how can we, and I always say that to people like that I train, like before thinking about the food choices or even gentle nutrition, can we start talking about the basic? Do you have enough to eat? Like, do you have access to food? Do you have even a possibility of variety of food? Like, we need to talk
Yes.
about this first before gentle nutrition.
Yes, exactly. And that's why whenever I talk to folks, I work in public health now. Whenever I'm talking to anyone, before I even get into the food, I always ask, where's your nearest grocery store? How often do you go? Like, do you have access to, these foods? Because there's no point in talking about nutrition if someone can't access food.
Yeah. If you don't have the basic, we're not going to talk about the fancy stuff.
Exactly. Exactly.
Let's talk about processed food. And I'm going to quote again from your book. If allowed, people are intentional with their choice. And in 2020, there's a statistic that you quote that 49% of people look for minimal processing because they have been sold on the idea that it's, quote, healthier. It's not surprising when we hear it, when we look at wellness culture, but is it true? And what is processed food?
Yes. I think that we're just scared of the word processed. And I like to say, I know it sounds nonsensical, but everything we eat to some degree is processed. And yes, there are various levels to processing, but we just need to remember that because people will say, I don't eat processed foods, and I can guarantee you do. I guarantee you
Yes.
do.
Well, I put butter on my bread this morning. Butter is processed.
Butter is processed. Yes, exactly. So, I there are different levels, but I think we need to stop saying the narrative. I don't need anything processed. Yes, you do. But I will say that people, I think with the headlines that are constantly out now, from I'm seeing them all the time, CNN, Washington Post, about the implications of processed foods. Now they're saying ultra processed. Now they're labeling that. But even ultra processed, I think people don't realize sometimes that ultra processed still are powders. There's still, if you are, let's say, vegan or vegetarian and you want to use like the Beyond Meat, those
Yep.
imitation patties, or, those are ultra processed. But that doesn't mean they're unhealthy foods. I even always use the example of nursing homes or hospitals who use supplemental nutrition like Ensure, Boost,
Yes.
Glucerna. Those are ultra processed, and that population needs that in order, to
To
survive.
survive.
And we need to remember that instead of just saying, oh, ultra processed foods are bad, we need to start. I would even prefer people start labeling the foods that they're talking about, because I say a bag of chips and a bottle of Glucerna, which is supplemental nutrition, are not the same thing. Not saying chips are bad. All foods have a place, but they're not the same thing.
For the education of the people listening to this podcast, what are those categories of processed food? Can you walk us through that, like in a simple way?
Yes. So we have the food that is not processed at all. And that would be if you go apple picking, go to an apple orchard and pick the apple and eat it there. Congratulations, you have not eaten processed food. Congrats. And then, so there's that category. Okay. And then the next category would be the minimal, which would be actually considered even organic, the apples at the grocery store, or foods that have minimal processing, meaning they're removing seeds or inedible parts, things like that. So minimal processing. And then we have the next level, which is the processed, which would be adding in maybe nutrients or vitamins to foods. Like you think bread, even though I'm sorry, bread is considered ultra processed, but when we're adding in like vitamins,
But vitamin D to milk.
yes,
Does that fit there?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And then we have the ultra processed foods, which are foods that don't. I think they put it. If we look at the Nova, which is who does the ultra processing, like they say the food doesn't look anything like its natural state, which sounds very scary. But when you think about it, that's the protein powders. So yes, almond milk doesn't look like the almond anymore, but that's okay.
But then, can we just take a minute to think about that? Like
Sure.
wellness culture. So I just spent a month in Indonesia. There's so many things we can talk about, like the different thing. But everywhere I went in Indonesia, because I was white, people would ask me, what kind of milk do you want in your coffee? Like, I want cow milk. And they were all surprised that a white person eats cow milk because Indonesia seems to attract health
Oh, I'm
and
sure.
wellness
Yeah.
experts and influencer. But everybody in the health and wellness promotes using oat milk. almond milk.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Meanwhile, that's an ultra processed food according to the standard of nutrition in America.
It
So
sure is.
promoting ultra processed food.
Uh-huh. It sure is. It's just, and oat milk, when you look at the price of that of oat milk, I mean, listen, if you love it, great. I'm not knocking it, but there is a financial difference. And yes, it is ultra processed. But again, it's, if we think about how oat milk is just soaking oats, maybe adding in some oil, which people are getting scared about now, for that texture, right? Because again, we have to add things to get the same texture. But it doesn't make it unhealthy. And I think we're associating, again, the word health with certain foods. Oh, it's healthy, it's not healthy. And it's just like, we have to look at the actual food in front of us. So I think that maybe we can step away from the fear of the word processed, because I think that has a hold on us.
Yeah, when you think about the milks, when you think about the protein powder that are sold as being healthy, and then we look at the common mass media message that says, particularly in America, the obesity, quote unquote, rate is linked to ultra processed food. And then you look around at wellness culture and we are plateauing, like we're saying, eat the protein powder and get rid of the milk, and we're promoting ultra processed food. The logic
Exactly.
doesn't work.
Exactly. And you would tell that to any wellness person and you would see the mental gymnastics. They would try to argue with it, but I'm just like, what you said, exactly. It's exactly it. It doesn't make sense.
And we'll go back to our social justice angle on this. If you are a population where there's no fresh food, or you don't have the financial privilege of buying fresh food, should you quote unquote starve instead of eating processed food or ultra processed food?
No, so my quote to everybody is always fed is best. I believe in that. I don't think it's just for babies. I think it's for people. I mean, people. Everyone's I think it's for adults, sorry. Babies are people. But I think it applies to everybody. And I think that sometimes, people don't realize or think about food insecurity. And I think that, they just will tell somebody make better choices, or you can just pick the cheaper option of vegetable. You can at least do that. And I don't think they realize some people actually aren't close to fresh foods. They're not close to grocery stores and often rely on canned foods or packaged foods, which people are, scared of because it's canned and it's in a package. Oh my goodness. But you know what? Those are the foods that are because they are shelf stable, which is important. Those are the foods that are being given out usually at soup kitchens or pantry items that people will line up for if they need those things. And that's important. There is still nutrition in canned food, in packaged food. It's shelf stable, which makes it safe, which makes it last longer. But it's still nutrition. So yes, I want people fed.
And that's what your book will help people, is to make somewhat sense of the nonsense
Exactly.
of the
I hope
wellness and
so.
yeah.
Yes.
So let's talk about your approach to nutrition. Like if we'll take all that stuff out and we'll say now, okay, it's elitist and I don't want to co-opt that and I don't want to participate in that. How do I approach nutrition then?
So I always say nutrition, of course, is individual. And my second quote is that all foods have a place, right? I think that, unless you're allergic, I would say that unless you're allergic to something, don't eat it. Okay. But all foods have a place. And we can try to find foods that nourish us individually, because all foods are not going to work for everybody. I was actually really arguing with somebody on TikTok, because
Oh, wow,
they
that's the
they
place.
said, I know. I was like, what? Why am I even?
Why?
Am I doing this? What did I start? But they said, well, no one overconsumes broccoli, or no one, or sorry, no one would say that they have to ration their broccoli. And I'm like, actually, people with IBS would. People with some, gut health things would actually. So if you want to go there, we can. But that's
And
what I
I can
mean.
tell
Like,
you,
yes,
I overate salad when I was dieting.
yes, yes,
Like I
yes.
binged on salad because there was no calorie in it. So sorry to interrupt,
Yes.
but like there's
Yeah,
so
no,
many
no.
angles to this.
Exactly, exactly. And people want to be, smart, and I'm like, I can also be smart and sassy as well, okay? If we want to go there. But anyway, so my point is that, all foods have a place for your individual self, right? So what we are looking at, as far as if our neighbor is eating something or your mom is eating something, that might not work for us. So I always encourage people to really think about the foods and how they feel after they eat. I think that's important as well, because we think of these health foods, but if you're eating something and it's really not working with your body, or it's upsetting your stomach or giving you GI issues, maybe you shouldn't eat it, even if it's broccoli,
Yep.
so I always say, find the food that works for you. If it's accessible, that's very important, if it's accessible. But there are many layers to nutrition. So I always say it's individual,
Yeah, and
always.
in your book you talk about an inclusive approach to nutrition, which I think it's important even for the professional listening, because we've got a good
Yes.
percentage of professional listening to this. Being inclusive in how you think, teach, and counsel people on nutrition is critical, not to create what I call food trauma by saying to a Latina person that white rice is bad.
Yes. Oh, that's such a perfect word. Yes. Or sorry, food trauma. That's exactly. It's so true. It's so true, because I don't think it comes from a malicious place. I
No.
really don't. I just think that, we can only learn so much in school. And, and I think that my hope is for people to become more aware. I will say that. I think we can become more aware, and I am not perfect. I am still learning. I always say that no one's perfect. But I think we can become more aware of situations that people deal with every day, and telling someone, like you just said, who is of a Latin background, don't eat white rice, or an Asian, background, don't eat white rice, that we need to rethink that. We need to figure out a way, that they can eat their cultural foods, because that's not going to work. And then we say, oh, they're non-compliant. Well, no, it's not that. It's not
And
that.
because I've been in that position, and I'm sure you've been, like healing the trauma that those people have had from prior health counseling, where they were told to not eat the white rice, and then you have to work them back into like eating white rice and then working through the emotion around that. So we have to be mindful of that as professionals.
Exactly, exactly. And it takes work. And I think it's important to acknowledge that it takes work, and to want to work on those things, because I think sometimes, again, I don't think it's a malicious intent at
No.
all, but I think we all can acknowledge there's still work to be done. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it goes with nutrition and body image. Like as a thin person, you counsel a person in a larger body. Like you, it's just bringing awareness to who you are versus the identity of the person in front of you, and what's the gap there that you may not be.
Hey, my
able to
sisters,
understand, but
if
you
you
can
are
get
loving
curious
what you are
about.
learning on the podcast,
Exactly.
you have
Exactly.
to come
And that's
check out
exactly it.
our
Just,
feminist
like, curious, like,
mentorship
what can I do?
masterclasses
What can I,
in
how
our
can I
internationally
better
recognized
myself? That's all
non-diet
we're
coaching
asking for here.
Yeah.
on our
It's
website
okay. It's
at
okay.
www.stephaniedota.com.
Amazing. So we can find your book
/shop.
everywhere.
This
Everywhere,
is where you can get
everywhere,
individual coaching and the
anywhere where
support
you
to
normally
take the
purchase
concept
books,
taught on the podcast
even the library.
to the next
Like, I'm just gonna
level.
say that.
Embrace our well-being
request
in
it
a way
at the
that will
library.
expand
I'm all
our
for libraries.
collective freedom and
Yes,
power.
it's available.
Come and join
everywhere that
myself
books
and
are
other
sold.
women to learn
Live
how to
nourished,
reshape your mind,
make peace with
not
food,
your body.
banish body shame,
I'll
and
see you
reclaim
there.
joy is available. And we can go and follow you, at least on the gram. I'm not on TikTok, but you're on the gram, and you're spilling the tea. That's your brand from a long
Yes.
time ago.
Yes, it's the nutrition tea. I'm pretty easy to find because that's my handle for everything.
Yes, good branding. All of that will be linked in the show notes. Thank you for spending time with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, my sisters, if you are loving what you are learning on the podcast, you have to come and check out our feminist mentorship masterclasses and our internationally recognized non-diet coaching certification. On our website at www.stephaniedose.com/shop. This is where you can get the individual coaching and the support to take the concept thought on the podcast to the next level. Embrace our well-being in a way that will expand our collective freedom and power. Come and join myself and other women to learn how to reshape your mind, not your body. I'll see you there.